She never thought her billionaire CEO ex would spot her on the road, with 6 months pregnancy even after he forced her to abort. "Get away from my car," Thea screamed, as Kieran blocked her driver's side door, rain plastering his $1,000 suit to his body. "6 months," he whispered, eyes fixed on her unmistakable pregnant belly. "6 months of believing I'd lost both of you. 6 months. Lost us?" Thea's voice broke. "You demanded I terminate this pregnancy. You said your empire was worth more than our child's life." "I never said those words." His face contorted with anguish as he slammed his palm against her window. "I bought a ring, Thea. I was going to ask you to be my wife, the mother of my child." Her world tilted on its axis as the baby kicked violently within her. "Then who told me you'd destroy me if I didn't abort? Who scheduled the appointment at that clinic?" "Someone who wanted us both to suffer." His eyes darkened with rage. "Someone who's about to pay with everything they have. Have you ever discovered that the greatest pain in your life, the choice that shattered your heart, was built on a deliberate lie? What would you do when you realize the person you've hated for months might actually be the victim of the same cruel manipulation as you? If you believe in standing up for your own choices against all odds, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Lux Love Chronicles with Mr. Wentworth for more stories of love, betrayal, and redemption that will keep you on the edge of your seat. 30 minutes earlier, Thea Morgan had been stuck in gridlock traffic on the rain-soaked highway, one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting on her swollen belly, as her unborn child kicked with surprising strength. The downpour had transformed Seattle's evening commute into a nightmare of flashing brake lights and impatient horns. She hummed softly, a melody she'd composed for the baby growing inside her, a secret lullaby for a child who wasn't supposed to exist. "Just you and me, little one," she murmured, feeling another strong kick against her palm. "We've made it this far. A little traffic won't stop us." 6 months pregnant and thriving despite everything, despite the ultimatum, despite leaving her dream job, despite rebuilding her life from scratch in a city where she'd once been considered architectural royalty. Thea had learned that survival sometimes meant driving away from everything familiar and starting again with nothing but determination and the precious life growing inside her. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof of her modest Honda Civic, a far cry from the luxury vehicle she'd once driven. Through the blur of her windshield wipers, Thea noticed a sleek black Aston Martin weaving through traffic with the entitled confidence of extreme wealth. Something about its movement triggered a memory, a phantom pain she'd spent months trying to forget. As the sports car pulled alongside her in the adjacent lane, Thea's breath caught in her throat. She didn't need to look. She knew exactly who drove that car, knew the precise way he handled the steering wheel, knew the imperious tilt of his head as he surveyed the world that might as well have been built for him. Kieran Blackwood, 37 years old, self-made billionaire, CEO of Blackwood Industries, one of the most formidable technology conglomerates in the Pacific Northwest. The father of her unborn child. Against her better judgment, Thea turned her head, a moth helplessly drawn to destructive flame. Through the rain-streaked glass, their eyes met for the first time in 6 months. She watched recognition flash across his aristocratic features, followed by confusion and then, as his gaze dropped to her unmistakably pregnant form, pure, undiluted shock. Time seemed to freeze in that moment of mutual recognition. Then the traffic began to move, and Thea's survival instincts kicked in. She accelerated, taking the next exit with reckless speed, her heart pounding against her ribs. In her rearview mirror, she saw the Aston Martin cutting across 2 lanes of traffic to follow her. "No, no, no," she whispered, panic rising in her throat. "This isn't happening." But it was. After 6 months of careful avoidance, of rebuilding her life piece by painful piece, Kieran Blackwood had seen her, had seen the pregnancy he demanded she terminate for the sake of his precious corporate empire. Thea's phone began to ring, the display lighting up with a name she'd never deleted but had sworn never to answer again. She ignored it, focusing instead on putting as much distance as possible between herself and the sleek black car that continued to follow her through the rain-soaked streets. She needed fuel. Her gas light had been blinking ominously for the past 10 minutes. With no other choice, she pulled into a service station, praying Kieran would drive past. Instead, the Aston Martin swung in behind her, blocking any chance of escape. Thea's knuckles turned white on the steering wheel as she watched through her rearview mirror. Kieran emerged from his car, rain immediately drenching his impeccable suit, plastering his dark hair to his forehead. Even disheveled by the downpour, He radiated power and authority, commanding the space around him as effortlessly as he commanded his boardroom. He approached her car with long, determined strides. Thea pressed the lock button, a futile gesture against a man who had once owned her heart so completely. "Thea." His voice was muffled through the glass, but still sent shivers down her spine. "Open the door. We need to talk." "Get away from my car," she shouted, hoping her voice sounded stronger than she felt. He didn't move, rain cascading down his face as he stared at her with an intensity that had once made her feel like the center of his universe. Now, it only reminded her of how completely he had shattered her world. "6 months," he whispered, eyes fixed on her unmistakable pregnant belly. "6 months of believing I'd lost both of you." The words made no sense. Lost them? He was the one who had decided their child was an inconvenient obstacle to his precious merger with Hoshimura Group, the Japanese conglomerate that would cement Blackwood Industries as a global powerhouse. "Lost us?" Thea's voice broke. "You demanded I terminate this pregnancy. You said your empire was worth more than our child's life." Something shifted in his expression, confusion, then dawning horror. "I never said those words." His face contorted with anguish as he slammed his palm against her window. "I bought a ring, Thea. I was going to ask you to be my wife, the mother of my child." Her world tilted on its axis as the baby kicked violently within her. "Then, who told me you'd destroy me if I didn't abort? Who scheduled the appointment at that clinic?" "Someone who wanted us both to suffer." His eyes darkened with rage. "Someone who's about to pay with everything they have." The rain continued to pound around them as Thea tried to process his words. Could it be possible? Had she spent 6 months hating a man who was as much a victim as she was? Slowly, her trembling fingers found the button to lower her window. Just an inch, just enough to hear him clearly over the rain. "Explain," she demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Make me understand how this happened." 8 months earlier, Thea Morgan had stood on the 40th floor of what would become Blackwood Tower, surveying the partially completed structure with professional pride. At 32, she was the youngest lead architect at Mercer & Finch, Seattle's most prestigious architectural firm, and Blackwood Tower was her masterpiece. A revolutionary design combining cutting-edge sustainability with breathtaking aesthetics. "I see you couldn't stay away on your day off," a deep voice remarked from behind her. Thea turned to find Kieran Blackwood approaching across the dusty concrete floor, looking incongruously polished in tailored trousers and a crisp white shirt rolled up at the sleeves. Unlike most billionaire clients who merely showed up for photo opportunities, Kieran was intimately involved in every aspect of his headquarters construction. "I could say the same about you, Mr. Blackwood," she replied, trying to maintain professional distance despite the now familiar flutter in her stomach whenever he appeared. "Shouldn't you be yachting or collecting rare wines, or whatever billionaires do on Sundays?" His laugh was unexpected and genuine, crinkling the corners of his eyes in a way that transformed his usually serious face. "I can yacht and collect wines any day. Watching my vision become reality? That's priceless." "Thanks. Your vision?" Thea raised an eyebrow, fighting a smile. "I seem to recall spending countless sleepless nights designing this building." "Our vision then," he conceded, moving to stand beside her at the floor-to-ceiling windows that would eventually offer panoramic views of Elliott Bay. "You've managed to translate what was in my head into something far more extraordinary than I imagined." They stood in companionable silence, watching the Seattle skyline bathed in rare winter sunshine. Their shoulders weren't quite touching, but Thea could feel the heat radiating from him, the magnetic pull that had been growing stronger with each project meeting. "Would you have dinner with me tonight?" Kieran asked suddenly, still gazing out at the city below. Thea tensed. They'd been dancing around this attraction for months, maintaining strict professionalism despite the chemistry that crackled between them during late-night design sessions and on-site visits. "You know that's not a good idea," she said quietly. "I'm the lead architect on your project. There are ethical considerations. The structure is 90% complete. Your primary work is done." Kieran turned to face her, his expression more vulnerable than she'd ever seen it. "I've respected the boundaries, Thea. I've waited. But I'm tired of pretending I'm not drawn to you beyond your brilliant architectural mind." "My firm has strict policies about client relationships," she countered, though her resolve was weakening under his intense gaze. "Then I'll sign whatever waiver they require. I'll speak to Mercer himself if necessary." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the different shades of gray in his eyes. "Just dinner. No expectations. That night had changed everything. Dinner had led to conversation so engrossing they closed down the restaurant. Intellectual passion had flared into physical attraction too powerful to deny. One night had become a weekend, then weeks of stolen moments and midnight phone calls. Despite their attempts at discretion, rumors began circulating through Seattle's business elite, the billionaire CEO and the architect, who had designed his empire's crown jewel. For 2 months, Thea had lived in a whirlwind of intoxicating happiness, working days at the firm and spending nights with Kieran in his penthouse overlooking the city. She had never believed in fairy tales, but for those brief, golden weeks, she had allowed herself to imagine a future with this complicated man, who challenged her intellectually and awakened parts of her soul she hadn't known existed. Then came the morning sickness, the missed period, the home pregnancy test that changed everything. Thea remembered with painful clarity the moment she'd told him, sitting on the edge of his bed one Sunday morning, heart hammering against her ribs. "I'm pregnant," she'd said simply, watching his face for a reaction. Kieran had gone completely still, the coffee mug halfway to his lips. "You're certain?" 3 tests. All positive. He'd set down the mug with deliberate care. "I see." That was all. Just "I see." Not joy, not panic, not anything she could interpret. Just those 2 cryptic words followed by a long silence as he'd stared out the window at the city below. "Say something," she'd finally pleaded. "Anything." "I need to process this," he'd replied, his voice carefully controlled. "It's unexpected." The understatement had almost made her laugh hysterically. "Yes, well, I wasn't exactly planning to get pregnant by Seattle's most eligible bachelor while working on the biggest project of my career." His phone had rung then, Desmond Fujimoto, his COO, with some crisis that required immediate attention. Kieran had answered, his expression shifting to the focused CEO mask she knew so well. "We'll talk about this tonight," he promised before leaving, squeezing her hand briefly in what might have been reassurance or apology. But they hadn't talked that night. Instead, Thea had received an email from an address she didn't recognize, containing details for an appointment at a private women's clinic the following day. The accompanying message had been brutally clear. "Kieran regrets the unpleasantness of this situation but cannot allow a personal indiscretion to threaten the Hoshimura merger. The pregnancy must be terminated immediately and discreetly. A car will collect you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Your cooperation will ensure your continued employment at Mercer and Finch. Any public disclosure of this matter will result in immediate legal action." Thea had stared at the message in disbelief, unable to reconcile its cold calculation with the man who had whispered poetry against her skin just days earlier. She'd called Kieran repeatedly, but her calls had gone straight to voicemail. Text messages had received no response. It was as if a wall had suddenly descended between them, impenetrable and absolute. Numb with shock and heartbreak, she packed an overnight bag the next morning, waiting mechanical for the promised car. It had arrived precisely at 9 a.m., a black sedan with tinted windows and a driver who didn't speak beyond confirming her name. The clinic had been discreet and expensive, the kind of place that catered to the wealthy who needed medical problems to disappear without public record. Thea had sat in the waiting room, surrounded by tasteful art and soft music, staring at the intake forms in her lap. She'd filled them out automatically, her hand moving across the paper, while her mind screamed in protest. This wasn't what she wanted. This wasn't her choice. But what option did she have? Her career, her reputation, her entire future hung in the balance. The nurse had called her name, led her to an examination room, instructed her to change into a gown. And that's when something had broken through. Thea's shocked compliance, a fierce, unexpected surge of protective love for the tiny life growing inside her. Her baby, her child. Not a personal indiscretion to be erased for corporate convenience. Instead of changing into the gown, Thea had gathered her belongings and walked out the back door of the clinic, bypassing the waiting driver. She'd taken a taxi to her apartment, packed whatever would fit in her car, withdrawn her savings, and driven south out of Seattle by nightfall. She'd emailed her resignation to Mercer and Finch from a motel in Portland, citing personal reasons. Within a week, she'd found a small apartment in Bellingham, far enough from Seattle to avoid accidental encounters, but close enough to the Canadian border to access clients in Vancouver. She'd established Morgan Sustainable Design, a small firm specializing in environmentally conscious residential projects, a far cry from the corporate skyscrapers she'd once created. but work that still utilized her talents while allowing her to remain largely anonymous. For 6 months, she'd rebuilt her life one careful brick at a time. She'd found new clients, made new friends, created a safe haven for herself and her growing child. She'd avoided all news about Blackwood Industries or Kieran himself, unable to bear seeing his success built on the foundation of their destroyed relationship. Until today, when fate and traffic had conspired to bring them face to face again. You expect me to believe someone else sent that email? Scheduled that appointment? Fia's voice was sharp with disbelief as she stared at Kieran through the partially lowered window. Who would have that kind of access to your personal life? Desmond. Kieran replied without hesitation. It had to be Desmond Fujimoto. Your COO? The man you trust to run your company? Fia's laugh was hollow. Why would he do that? The Hoshimura merger. Kieran ran a hand through his rain-soaked hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. Fia, please. Can we talk somewhere that isn't a gas station parking lot in the pouring rain? She hesitated, every instinct screaming that letting Kieran back into her life would be a catastrophic mistake. But the baby kicked again, a reminder of what was at stake, not just her heart this time, but their child's future. There's a diner at the next exit, she said finally. I'll meet you there. But if this is some elaborate manipulation, Kieran, I swear. It's not, he interrupted, his expression raw with an emotion she couldn't quite name. I would never hurt you like that. Never. 20 minutes later, they sat across from each other in a vinyl booth, steam rising from untouched coffee between them. The diner was nearly empty, just a few truckers at the counter and an elderly couple by the window, allowing them a measure of privacy despite the public setting. Kieran couldn't stop staring at her belly, his eyes tracking every slight movement as the baby shifted within her. How far along are you? 26 weeks. Fia answered, one hand resting protectively over her stomach. It's a girl. Something flickered across his face, wonder, grief, regret, all tangled together. A daughter, he whispered. We're having a daughter. I'm having a daughter, Fia corrected firmly. You gave up any right to call her yours when you arranged for her to be terminated. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Kieran leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. I never arranged anything of the sort. When you told me you were pregnant, I was shocked, yes. It wasn't planned, but after the initial surprise, he paused, seeming to struggle for words. I spent that entire day planning how to make it work. I called my jeweler. I had dinner reservations at Canlis. I was going to ask you to marry me that night. Fia felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her. That's not possible. I got the email with the clinic appointment. The car came to pick me up. What email? What appointment? Kieran's confusion appeared genuine. I called you repeatedly that night, but you never answered. By the next morning, you'd vanished. Your apartment was empty. Your phone was disconnected. No one at Mercer and Finch would tell me anything beyond the fact that you'd resigned. Because I thought you wanted me to get rid of our baby. Fia's voice rose, drawing glances from the few other patrons. She lowered it with effort. The email said you couldn't allow a personal indiscretion to threaten your precious merger. That if I didn't cooperate, you'd make sure I never worked in architecture again. Kieran's face had gone pale, his knuckles white around his coffee mug. I never sent that. I would never say those things. Our child was never a personal indiscretion to me. Then who did? Fia demanded. Who else knew about the pregnancy? No one. At least, no one I told. He hesitated. But Desmond called me right after you told me. He said there was an urgent issue with Hoshimura's legal team. I had to leave immediately for an emergency meeting. Convenient timing, Fia observed skeptically. Too convenient. Kieran agreed. And when I returned to the penthouse that evening, Desmond mentioned he'd heard a rumor about you and me. He suggested that any personal entanglements could jeopardize the merger, that the Hoshimura family was extremely traditional, and would balk at their potential partner having a scandalous affair. So you sent me to a clinic to solve the problem, Fia concluded bitterly. No, Kieran's vehemence startled her. I told Desmond that my personal life was none of Hoshimura's business, and that I intended to make our relationship public. That's when I tried calling you, but you never answered. Fia's mind raced, trying to reconcile these two contradictory narratives. Could Desmond have intercepted their communications? Sent that email in Kieran's name? Arranged the clinic appointment? It seemed far-fetched, like something from a soap opera rather than real life. Why would your COO go to such extreme lengths? She asked. What would he gain from separating us? Control, Kieran replied immediately. Desmond has been with Blackwood Industries since the beginning. He's always seen himself as my right hand, my most trusted advisor. When the Hoshimura merger was in its early stages, he positioned himself as the essential link between our companies. And then you met me, Thea said slowly, beginning to see the pattern. And then I met you, Kieran confirmed. Suddenly, I was distracted, making decisions without consulting him first. Prioritizing time with you over business meetings he considered crucial. So he decided to eliminate the distraction, Thea whispered, one hand moving protectively over her stomach as the implication sank in. If that's what he did, Kieran cautioned. We don't have proof yet. But Thea, he reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. I have spent 6 months searching for you, hiring private investigators who found nothing, wondering what I said, or did that made you disappear so completely. You think I wanted to disappear? Thea felt tears threatening and blinked them back fiercely. I loved my career. I loved. She stopped herself before admitting how deeply she had loved him. I had to rebuild everything from nothing. All because I believed you had discarded me and our child for corporate convenience. I would never do that, Kieran said quietly. Never. A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the clatter of dishes from the diner kitchen and the steady drumming of rain against the windows. Thea studied Kieran's face, searching for signs of deception and finding only what appeared to be genuine anguish. Even if what you're saying is true, she said finally, it doesn't change the fact that I've spent 6 months building a new life. A life that doesn't include you. A life that includes my daughter, he countered, his gaze dropping to her belly. A daughter you didn't know existed until an hour ago. Through no choice of my own. His voice hardened slightly. Thea, if someone manipulated us both, separated us through lies and deception, don't we owe it to ourselves, to our child, to uncover the truth? The baby kicked again, a sharp movement that made Thea wince. Kieran noticed immediately, concern replacing the intensity in his expression. Are you all right? She's just active, Thea replied, rubbing the spot where a tiny foot or elbow had jabbed her. Especially when I'm stressed or emotional. May I? Kieran hesitated, then extended his hand across the table. Palm up. May I feel her? The request was so unexpected, so vulnerable, that Thea found herself nodding before she could think better of it. She placed her hand over his, guiding it to the spot where their daughter continued her gymnastics routine. Kieran's sharp intake of breath when he felt the movement was unmistakable. His eyes widened, a look of pure wonder transforming his features as he experienced his child's presence for the first time. That's incredible, he whispered, awe evident in every syllable. She's so strong. Like her mother, Thea said pointedly, but without the bitterness that would have colored the words an hour earlier. Like both her parents, Kieran amended gently. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, Thea glimpsed the man she had fallen in love with, passionate, brilliant, unexpectedly tender beneath his powerful exterior. Thea, please. Give me a chance to prove what I'm saying. Let me investigate what really happened 6 months ago. If I'm wrong, if I sent that email. He swallowed hard. Then I'll accept whatever role you're willing to allow me in our daughter's life, on your terms entirely. And if you're right, if Desmond really did orchestrate all this, then he will face the consequences of his actions. The steel in Kieran's voice reminded Thea of why competitors feared him in the business world. And you and I will figure out where to go from there. Together. Thea withdrew her hand, breaking the connection. I need to think about this. It's too much to process all at once. Of course. Kieran reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a business card, writing a number on the back before sliding it across the table. This is my personal cell. Not the one you had before. I changed it recently. Call me anytime, day or night. Thea took the card, tucking it into her purse without looking at it. I should go. I have an early client meeting tomorrow. You're still working? At 26 weeks? Concern furrowed his brow. Some of us don't have billion-dollar empires to fall back on. She replied, unable to keep the edge from her voice. My firm is small but growing. I can't afford to take time off yet. Your firm? Interest sparked in his eyes. You started your own company? Morgan Sustainable Design. We specialize in environmentally conscious residential and small commercial projects. Despite everything, pride crept into her voice. It's nothing compared to Blackwood Tower. But it's mine. I built it from nothing while carrying your child. Admiration joined the complex mix of emotions on Kieran's face. That's extraordinary, Thea. You're extraordinary. 1. The simple compliment, delivered with evident sincerity, threatened to crack the protective shell she'd built around her heart. Thea stood abruptly, gathering her purse and jacket. I need to go, she repeated, more firmly this time. I'll think about what you've said. Bye. Kieran rose as well, his height and presence drawing glances from around the diner. Promise me one thing, he said, his voice low and urgent. Promise you won't disappear again. Even if you decide you want nothing to do with me, at least let me know you and the baby are safe. The raw emotion in his request caught her off guard. I promise, she found herself saying. But I need time, Kieran, and space to think. Whatever you need, he agreed immediately. Just don't shut me out completely. Not again. As Thea drove home through the still falling rain, her mind replayed their conversation from every angle. Could Kieran be telling the truth? Had they both been victims of a calculated deception designed to separate them at the most vulnerable moment of their relationship? Part of her, the part that had spent 6 months building walls around her broken heart, refused to believe it could be so simple. Kieran was a master strategist, a man who had built a technology empire through brilliant manipulation of market forces. What if this was just another strategy, a way to work his way back into her life now that he'd discovered the child she'd chosen to keep? But another part, the part that had once known the feel of his heartbeat beneath her cheek as they lay tangled in his bed, recognized the genuine pain in his eyes when she described that email, that clinic appointment. Kieran Blackwood was many things, but she had never known him to be cruel for cruelty's sake. By the time she reached her small craftsman-style house on the outskirts of Bellingham, Thea had made a decision. She would allow Kieran to investigate Desmond's potential involvement, but she would conduct her own parallel investigation, relying on contacts from her previous life in Seattle's architectural world. If they had indeed been manipulated, she wanted to discover the truth as much as he did. But she would maintain emotional distance throughout. For her daughter's sake, she would uncover the truth about what had torn their family apart before it even had a chance to form. But for her own protection, she would not allow herself to believe in second chances until she had irrefutable proof that the first chance had been stolen from them by someone else's machinations. The baby kicked again as Thea entered her quiet house, as if offering her own opinion on the matter. I know, little one, Thea murmured, rubbing her belly soothingly. Your father has always had impeccable timing, just not in the way we expected. Across town, in the luxury hotel suite he maintained in Bellingham for business trips to the region, Kieran Blackwood paced the length of the room, phone pressed to his ear as he waited for his head of security to answer. Riker, he said when the call connected. I need everything you can find on Desmond's activities from March 15th to 17th. Email logs, phone records, security footage from headquarters, everything. And I need it tonight. Sir? The confusion in Riker Harlow's voice was evident even through the phone. Has something happened with Mr. Fujimoto? I'm not sure yet. Kieran replied grimly. But I intend to find out. And Riker? This stays between us. No one at Blackwood can know what we're investigating. Especially not Desmond. Understood, sir. I'll call you as soon as I have something. Fixing with. After ending the call, Kieran moved to the window, staring out at the rain-slicked streets below. Somewhere in this small city was the woman he had spent 6 months searching for, carrying the child he had never stopped wanting. If Desmond had indeed orchestrated their separation, had robbed him of these precious months of Thea's pregnancy, had nearly caused his daughter to be erased from existence. Kieran's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Desmond Fujimoto had been more than his COO. He had been a mentor, a friend, one of the few people Kieran trusted implicitly in the cutthroat world of corporate technology. If that trust had been betrayed in the most personal way possible, the consequences would be severe and far-reaching. But first, he needed proof. And once he had it, he would ensure that nothing and no one ever threatened his family again. Family. The word echoed in his mind, simultaneously foreign and deeply resonant. For a man who had spent his life building an empire rather than personal connections, the fierce protectiveness he felt toward Thea and their unborn daughter was both unfamiliar and all-consuming. He'd lost them once through deception. He would not lose them again. The next morning, Thea arrived at her office, a converted Victorian house she shared with a graphic designer and a web development firm, to find her assistant, Zora, already at her desk despite the early hour. You were here early, Thea observed, hanging her rain-dampened coat on the vintage rack by the door. And you look like you haven't slept, Zora countered, studying Thea with the frank concern of someone who had become more friend than employee over the past 6 months. At 25, Zora was younger than Thea, but possessed a wisdom and perceptiveness that belied her age. Bad night with the baby alien? Something like that, Thea replied, unwilling to delve into the real reason for her sleepless night. Is the Clark proposal ready for the meeting? On your desk, along with the sustainable materials samples they requested. Zora followed Thea into her office, closing the door behind them. Okay, Spill. Something's wrong, and it's not just pregnancy insomnia. Thea sank into her chair, suddenly too exhausted to maintain the pretense. I ran into Kieran yesterday. Kieran? As in, billionaire baby daddy Kieran? Zora's eyes widened. Kieran Bellingham? What was he doing here? Business trip, apparently. We ended up at the same gas station during the storm. Thea rubbed her temples, feeling the beginning of a tension headache. He saw me, Zora. Saw that I'm still pregnant. Oh shit. Zora dropped into the chair across from Thea's desk. What happened? Do we need to move to Canada? I've always wanted to live in Vancouver anyway. Despite everything, Thea smiled at her assistant's immediate leap to drastic action. No, we don't need to flee the country. But things are more complicated than I thought. Complicated how? He claims he never told me to terminate the pregnancy. Says he was planning to propose the night I disappeared. Thea hesitated, still struggling to believe it herself. He thinks his COO intercepted our communications, sent that email in his name, arranged the clinic appointment, all to separate us because our relationship threatened some massive merger. Zora whistled low. That's either the most elaborate lie I've ever heard or one hell of a corporate conspiracy. Exactly. Thea reached for the prenatal tea Zora had prepared for her, finding comfort in its familiar warmth. And I don't know which is worse, that the man I loved could have been so cruel, or that someone could have successfully manipulated both of us at our most vulnerable moment. What are you going to do? Let him investigate, for starters. But conduct my own investigation too. Thea met her assistant's concerned gaze directly. Which is where you come in. Me? What can I do? You were a data analyst before you decided to change careers, right? Worked for that tech startup in Seattle? Pinnacle Solutions. Yeah, Zora confirmed. 3 years of database mining and pattern recognition before I realized I was dying inside and needed a creative outlet. So you know how to track digital footprints, find the origin of emails, that sort of thing. Understanding dawned on Zora's face. You want me to trace the email that supposedly came from Kieran? If you can, Thea confirmed. I still have it, never could bring myself to delete it, like keeping evidence of a crime. If Kieran's telling the truth, that email didn't come from him, which means it originated somewhere else. I'll need the full header information, not just the body text. Zora said, professional interest clearly peaked, and it might take time. Whoever did this, if someone did this, probably covered their tracks. Live. I understand. But Zora, Thea leaned forward, her expression grave. This stays between us. If Desmond Fujimoto really did orchestrate all this, he's not someone to be taken lightly. He's Kieran's right hand, with all the power and resources that implies. Corporate espionage and manipulation? Sounds like the plot of a thriller novel. Zora's expression sobered. But I get it. Confidential mission. Top secret clearance only. Thank you. The relief of having an ally in this bizarre situation was overwhelming. I know this is beyond your normal job description. Are you kidding? This is way more interesting than formatting proposals for eco-friendly beach houses. Zora grinned, then grew serious again. But Thea, whatever we find out, be careful. If Kieran is telling the truth, you might have to reconsider everything you've believed for the past 6 months. And ever. And if he's lying, Thea finished quietly, then I'll have to accept that the man I thought I knew never existed at all. Before Zora could respond, Thea's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Looking into Desmond's activities from March. Need the exact time you received the email about the clinic. Also, any other communications you received supposedly from me during that period. K. No pleasantries, no emotional appeals, just direct, action-oriented text, focused on gathering evidence. It was so characteristically Kieran that Thea almost smiled despite herself. When faced with a problem, he never wallowed in emotion or uncertainty. He simply devised a strategy and executed it with precision. She showed the message to Zora, who raised an eyebrow. At least he's not wasting time. You going to answer? Yes, Thea decided. If he's investigating from his end while we investigate from ours, we're more likely to uncover the truth. She typed a brief response. Email arrived 5:47 p.m. on March 15. No other communications after that. I called repeatedly but couldn't reach you. His reply came almost instantly. My calendar shows a dinner meeting with Hoshimura representatives that night, 6 to 9 p.m. I have no recollection of scheduling it. Checking security footage from the building to confirm my whereabouts. Thea stared at the message, her heart beginning to race. If Kieran could prove he was somewhere else when that email was sent in his name, it would be the first tangible evidence supporting his version of events. The meeting with the Clarks is in 20 minutes, Zora reminded her gently. Want me to reschedule? No, Thea shook her head, pulling herself back to the present. Life goes on, mysterious email or not. I have a business to run and a baby to support. But as she gathered her materials for the client meeting, Thea couldn't shake the feeling that her carefully reconstructed life was about to be upended once again, this time, perhaps, by the truth rather than by lies. If you're gripped by this tale of deception and rediscovered truth, hit that like button and comment what you would have done in Thea's position. Would you trust Kieran's explanation, or would you need irrefutable proof before letting him back into your life? Subscribe to Lux Love Chronicles with Mr. Wentworth for more stories that will keep you guessing until the very end. Kieran Blackwood had built his reputation on rational decision-making and emotional control. In boardrooms across the country, he was known for his unflappable demeanor, his ability to negotiate multi-billion-dollar deals without revealing a hint of his true thoughts or feelings. Yet, as he sat in Riker Harlow's office, watching security footage from March 15th, he found himself struggling to maintain that legendary composure. On the screen before him, Desmond Fujimoto, his COO, his right hand for nearly a decade, was clearly visible entering Kieran's private office at 5:30 p.m., remaining there alone for approximately 20 minutes before exiting with a satisfied expression. The timing matches, Riker observed quietly. The email to Miss Morgan was sent at 5:47 p.m., according to her information. And where was I during this period? Kieran's voice was dangerously calm. Based on keycard logs and garage security footage, you left the building at 5:15 p.m., presumably headed home to meet Miss Morgan as planned. Riker hesitated. But at 5:40 p.m., you received a call that appears to have diverted you to the Rainier Club instead. The Hoshimura dinner meeting. Kieran's jaw tightened. A meeting I have no memory of scheduling, that doesn't appear in my personal calendar, only in the shared corporate calendar that Desmond has access to. Yes, sir. Riker, a former military intelligence officer who now headed Blackwood Industries' security division, remained professional despite the increasingly disturbing implications of their investigation. We've also retrieved email logs from the server backup. There's evidence of correspondence being deleted from your account during that same time window. Can you recover the deleted emails? Some of them. Our technical team is working on it now. Riker handed Kieran a thin file. What we've managed to recover so far includes draft emails to Miss Morgan that were never sent. They appear to have been written by you earlier that day. Kieran opened the file, his expression hardening as he read the recovered email fragments. There, in black and white, was evidence of what he'd actually been thinking that day, not anger or disappointment about Thea's pregnancy, but plans for their future together. Logistics of how they would make it work, even notes about potential wedding venues. He erased all of this, Kieran said softly, the controlled fury in his voice making Riker straighten instinctively. He erased our future. There's more, sir. Riker's tone suggested he was saving the worst for last. We've discovered communications between Mr. Fujimoto and the Hoshimura group that weren't included in the official negotiation records. Private exchanges suggesting that he was positioning himself to lead the merged company's North American operations, a position that would effectively make him your equal rather than your subordinate. So that was his endgame. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Eliminate Thea as a distraction, secure his position with Hoshimura through back channels, present himself as the steady, rational counterbalance to my supposedly volatile personal life. It appears so, sir. Kieran closed the file, his decision made. I want complete documentation of everything we've found. Every email, every security log, every frame of footage. And I want Desmond's access to all Blackwood systems revoked immediately. Sir? Riker looked startled for the first time. That's going to raise immediate red flags. Mr. Fujimoto will know something's happening. Good. Kieran stood, straightening his suit jacket with deliberate precision. Let him know. Let him wonder. Let him feel a fraction of the uncertainty and fear that Thea has lived with for 6 months because of his actions. What about the Hoshimura merger? It's in the final stages of approval. The merger will proceed. Kieran's expression was implacable, but with significant changes to the leadership structure. Desmond Fujimoto will not be part of Blackwood Industries' future in any capacity. As Kieran strode from the office, phone already in hand to call his legal team, he felt a cold clarity unlike anything he'd experienced in his business career. This wasn't about corporate strategy or market position. This was about justice, for Thea, for their unborn daughter, for the 6 months of their lives that had been stolen by a man's ruthless ambition. But first, he needed to share what he discovered with the person who mattered most. Across town, Thea was concluding her meeting with the Clark family, potential clients interested in building an eco-friendly vacation home on the Washington coast. The presentation had gone well, despite her distraction, and they had tentatively agreed to move forward with initial design concepts. As she showed them out, thanking them for their time, Thea noticed a sleek black car parked across the street from her office, not Kieran's Aston Martin, but a similarly expensive vehicle with tinted windows that screamed corporate executive. Her instincts immediately went on alert. Zora, she called as she closed the front door, did you see that black Mercedes across the street? Yeah. It pulled up about 20 minutes ago. Zora appeared from the back office, laptop in hand. I was just coming to find you. I've got something on that email. What is it? It definitely didn't come from Kieran's personal email account, despite appearing that way in your inbox. The header information shows it was sent through a redirecting service that masks the original sender. Can you trace it back to the source? Not directly, but I found something else interesting. Zora opened her laptop, pointing to a string of code. This particular redirecting service is favored by a company called NetShield Security, which provides digital privacy solutions to corporate clients. Let me guess, Thea said, a chill running down her spine. Blackwood Industries is one of their clients. Bingo. And according to their publicly available client list, they specifically provide services to Blackwood's legal and executive divisions. Divisions that Desmond would have access to. Thea concluded, the evidence mounting in support of Kieran's theory. Before she could process this new information, her phone rang, Kieran's number flashing on the screen. I have proof, he said without preamble when she answered. Security footage of Desmond in my office when the email was sent. Evidence of deleted correspondence. Private communications with Hoshimura that I was never meant to see. Zora found something too, Thea replied, her voice steadier than she felt. The email was sent through a redirecting service used by Blackwood's executive division. It was him. All of it. The cold fury in Kieran's voice was palpable even through the phone. He orchestrated everything, Thea. He tried to erase our child from existence for the sake of his own ambition. The baby kicked sharply, as if responding to her father's anger. Thea placed a protective hand over her belly, struggling to process the confirmation of what she had begun to suspect. There's a black Mercedes parked outside my office, she said suddenly. It's been there for at least 20 minutes. What? Kieran's tone shifted from anger to alarm. Thea, listen to me. Desmond's access to Blackwood systems was just revoked. If he's realized what's happening, if he suspects you're involved, you think he'd come after me? The idea seemed absurd, like something from a thriller rather than real life. We're talking about corporate manipulation, not physical danger. We're talking about a man who was willing to manipulate you into terminating our child to advance his career. Kieran countered grimly. I'm not willing to underestimate what he might do when cornered. Where exactly are you? At my office, the Victorian on Maple Street. Thea moved to the window, peering cautiously through the blinds. The car is still there, but I can't see who's inside. Stay where you are. Lock the doors. I'm 10 minutes away. The sound of movement came through the phone, Kieran clearly already in motion. And Thea? If anyone approaches the building that you don't recognize, call 911 immediately. The line went dead before she could argue that he was overreacting. Thea turned to find Zora watching her with wide eyes. So I'm guessing Kieran found evidence supporting the evil CEO theory? Yes, and now he thinks Desmond might be outside in that Mercedes. Thea moved away from the window, unconsciously placing herself further from potential sight lines. He's on his way here. Should we call the police? Zora asked, her casual tone belied by the tension in her posture. Not yet. It could be nothing, a potential client scoping out our office, a lost driver checking directions. Even as she said it, Thea didn't believe it. The timing was too coincidental, the presence too ominous. I'll lock the back door, Zora decided, moving toward the rear of the converted house, and maybe move our client files off the front desk, just in case. She was interrupted by a sharp knock at the front door. Both women froze, exchanging alarmed glances. Miss Morgan? A male voice called from outside. I'm Desmond Fujimoto from Blackwood Industries. I was hoping we could speak briefly about a potential project. Thea felt her blood run cold as Desmond Fujimoto's voice penetrated the door. Her hand instinctively moved to protect her belly, her unborn daughter shifting restlessly as if sensing her mother's sudden fear. Don't answer it, Zora whispered, already backing toward the office phone. I'll call the police. But Thea found herself moving forward instead, a surge of anger replacing her initial fear. This man, this stranger she'd never actually met, had nearly destroyed her life, had attempted to erase her child from existence. The least he deserved was to face her directly. Miss Morgan? Desmond called again, knocking more insistently. I know you're in there. This is a matter of some urgency. Stay back, Thea instructed Zora, approaching the door but keeping it firmly closed. What do you want, Mr. Fujimoto? There was a pause, as if her direct acknowledgement had surprised him. I'd prefer to discuss this matter privately. It concerns Kieran Blackwood and your previous relationship. Anything you have to say can be said through the door, Thea replied, her voice steadier than she expected. Or you can leave a card and I'll contact you when it's convenient. I'm afraid this can't wait. His tone hardened slightly. Certain information has come to light that could be damaging to both you and Kieran, if not addressed immediately. Are you threatening me? Thea asked incredulously. Not at all. I'm offering a solution that benefits everyone involved. Desmond's voice took on a reasonable, almost soothing quality that Thea found more disturbing than outright aggression. Please, 5 minutes of your time could save months of unpleasantness. 1. Thea glanced at Zora, who was already on the phone with emergency services, speaking in a hushed but urgent tone. Help would be coming, but not immediately. She needed to keep Desmond talking, prevent him from becoming more aggressive or attempting to force entry. What kind of solution? She asked, playing for time. A generous financial arrangement in exchange for your discretion and relocation. The words were delivered with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to solving problems with money. A fresh start somewhere with better opportunities for someone in your condition. The clinical reference to her pregnancy, her condition, sent a wave of revulsion through Thea. This was the man who had orchestrated her separation from Kieran, who had sent her to that clinic with the expectation that she would emerge no longer pregnant, no longer an inconvenience to his corporate ambitions. Before she could formulate a response that wouldn't consist entirely of profanity, she heard the distinctive sound of tires screeching to a halt outside. Through the side window, she saw Kieran's Aston Martin pulling up behind Desmond's Mercedes, Kieran himself emerging from the driver's side with an expression she had never seen on his face before, pure, undiluted rage. Fujimoto. Kieran's voice carried clearly across the small front yard. Step away from that door. Desmond turned, momentary surprise flashing across his features before his composed mask slipped back into place. Kieran, I was just introducing myself to Miss Morgan. I thought perhaps a personal approach might help resolve this situation. The only situation that needs resolving is your immediate resignation and the non-disclosure agreement my lawyers are drafting. Kieran advanced up the walkway with measured steps, his fury contained but palpable. Before I have you arrested for corporate espionage, identity theft, and harassment. Thea opened the door a crack, unable to resist witnessing this confrontation directly. Desmond Fujimoto was not what she had expected, not a hulking villain but a trim, immaculately dressed man in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses that gave him an academic appearance. He looked more like a university professor than a corporate manipulator. You're overreacting, Kieran, Desmond said, maintaining his calm facade despite the dangerous glint in Kieran's eyes. I was simply trying to contain a potentially damaging situation before it impacts the merger. By threatening the mother of my child? By showing up uninvited at her workplace? Kieran stopped just short of Desmond, using his slight height advantage to full effect. The same way you contained the situation 6 months ago by impersonating me? By scheduling a termination appointment without my knowledge or consent? Desmond's expression flickered briefly before settling into calculated regret. I made certain decisions in the best interest of the company. Perhaps they were misguided, but my intentions were entirely self-serving. Kieran cut in, his voice razor-sharp. The private communications with Hoshimura, the position you were negotiating for yourself, this was never about protecting Blackwood Industries. It was about advancing your own ambitions at my expense. At Thea's expense. At my daughter's expense. The word, daughter, seemed to catch Desmond off guard. His gaze shifted to Thea, still partially shielded by the door, his eyes dropping to her pregnant belly with a mixture of surprise and calculation. A daughter, he repeated softly. How? Unexpected. Something in his tone, the clinical assessment, the complete lack of human empathy, sent a chill down Thea's spine. She instinctively stepped back, one hand protectively covering her stomach. Stay away from her, Kieran warned, moving to place himself between Desmond and the door. You've done enough damage. Have I? Desmond's composure was remarkable given the circumstances. Or have I simply delayed the inevitable? You were never suited for fatherhood, Kieran. Your own childhood made that abundantly clear. I merely spared you the mistake of trying to build a family when your true purpose has always been building an empire. The words struck with precision, finding vulnerabilities Thea hadn't known existed. She watched Kieran's shoulders tense, a flicker of something like pain crossing his features before being swallowed by renewed anger. You don't know the first thing about what I'm suited for. Kieran replied, his voice dangerously soft. And you certainly don't get to decide the direction of my life or who I share it with. I've dedicated 10 years to Blackwood Industries, Desmond countered, a hint of genuine emotion finally breaking through his polished veneer. 10 years of guiding you, advising you, protecting you from distractions and poor decisions. Everything I did was to ensure the company's success, your success. You betrayed my trust in the most personal way possible. Kieran's expression was unyielding. Whatever your justifications, whatever your delusions about acting in my best interest, the result is the same. You're finished at Blackwood. The board has already been notified of your immediate termination. For the first time, Desmond's composure truly faltered. You can't do that. Not with the merger in its final stages. Hoshimura won't proceed without me as the liaison. Hoshimura has already been informed of the change in leadership structure. Riker Harlow will be taking over your responsibilities effective immediately. Riker? Your head of security? Desmond's laugh was brittle with disbelief. He knows nothing about international business negotiations or corporate strategy. He knows about loyalty and integrity, Kieran replied coldly. Two qualities you conspicuously lack. The wail of approaching sirens cut through the tension. Zora had succeeded in summoning the police, their arrival imminent. Desmond glanced toward the street, calculation clear in his expression as he weighed his options. This isn't over, Kieran, he said finally, straightening his already impeccable suit. The board won't stand for this disruption so close to finalizing the biggest deal in the company's history. When they hear my side, they already have. Kieran's smile was devoid of warmth. Along with copies of every email you falsified, every meeting you fabricated, and every communication you had with Hoshimura behind my back. Your security clearance has been revoked, your office is being packed up as we speak, and there's a team of lawyers preparing to ensure you never work in this industry again. A police cruiser pulled up to the curb, two officers emerging with the cautious alertness their training demanded. Desmond's expression hardened into something cold and calculating. You're making a grave mistake, he said quietly. That child will destroy everything you've built, just as I warned. Family is a weakness you can't afford, Kieran. You'll realize that eventually. He turned away, presenting a picture of calm cooperation as the officers approached. Good afternoon, officers. There seems to have been a misunderstanding. I was just leaving. Thea watched as Desmond smoothly explained away the situation, portraying himself as a corporate representative making a business call that had become unnecessarily heated. His performance was flawless, reasonable, slightly apologetic, completely believable. The officers, finding no immediate cause for arrest when neither Kieran nor Thea pressed charges, simply ensured that Desmond left the premises with a warning not to return. As his Mercedes pulled away from the curb, Thea finally stepped fully onto the porch, her legs suddenly unsteady beneath her. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was ebbing, leaving her lightheaded and trembling. "Thea?" Kieran was at her side immediately, concern replacing anger in his expression. "Are you all right? Did he threaten you before I arrived?" Not explicitly. She leaned against the doorframe, breathing deeply to steady herself. "He offered money for my discretion and relocation, as if I could be bought off." Kieran's jaw tightened. That's Desmond, always believing every problem has a price tag. His eyes softened as they met hers. "Are you sure you're okay? You're pale." Before Thea could answer, a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen, intense enough to make her gasp and clutch at her belly. Kieran's arms were around her instantly, supporting her weight as her knees threatened to buckle. "Thea? What is it? What's wrong?" "I don't know," she managed through gritted teeth as the pain subsided momentarily. "Just a cramp, maybe. Stress-related." "Nah." But even as she said it, she knew this was different from the Braxton Hicks contractions she'd experienced occasionally over the past few weeks. This pain had a focused intensity that sent alarm bells ringing through her mind. "We need to get you to a hospital," Kieran said firmly, already guiding her toward his car. "Zora, can you lock up here?" Zora appeared in the doorway, her face etched with concern. "Of course. Should I follow you there?" "Yes, please," Thea replied, another wave of pain washing over her. "And bring my hospital bag from the office closet, just in case." "In case?" Kieran's expression sharpened with fear. "Thea, you're only 26 weeks. It's too early." "I know," she whispered, leaning heavily against him as they made their way to the car. "But babies don't always follow schedules." The drive to Bellingham Regional Medical Center passed in a blur of pain and fear. Kieran broke every speed limit, his normally smooth driving style replaced by urgent efficiency as he navigated through traffic with one hand on the wheel and the other clasping Thea's tightly. "It's going to be all right," he repeated, as much to himself as to her. "Both of you are going to be fine." Thea wanted to believe him, but the increasing frequency of the pain suggested otherwise. By the time they reached the emergency entrance, she was experiencing contractions every 4 minutes, her body betraying her with a process that shouldn't have begun for another 14 weeks. Everything happened quickly after that: nurses with a wheelchair, the rapid triage assessment, monitors strapped to her belly to track the baby's heartbeat and her contractions. The diagnosis came swiftly, and with grave concern from the attending obstetrician. "Preterm labor," Dr. Winters announced after examining Thea, "likely triggered by stress and elevated blood pressure. We're going to start you on medications to try to stop the contractions and steroids to help the baby's lungs develop more quickly, just in case we can't delay delivery." "In case?" Kieran echoed, his face pale with fear. What are her chances, their chances, if the baby comes now? At 26 weeks, survival rates are around 80–90%. Dr. Winters replied with cautious optimism. But there are significant risks of complications, particularly with lung development and cognitive function. Every day we can keep this baby inside is critical. Thea closed her eyes, focusing on her breathing as another contraction gripped her. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. Their daughter wasn't supposed to enter the world under these circumstances, premature, at risk, with parents who barely understood their relationship to each other anymore. "This is my fault," Kieran said quietly when the doctor had left to order the medications. "If I hadn't confronted Desmond at your office." "Don't," Thea interrupted, gripping his hand tightly. "This isn't your fault. If anything, it's Desmond's. Or maybe it's just bad luck, bad timing." She attempted a weak smile. "Our specialties, apparently." Kieran brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss against her knuckles. The tender gesture, so at odds with the controlled businessman she'd witnessed confronting Desmond, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I know." He met her gaze directly, no pretense or facade between them for perhaps the first time since their reunion. "I'm terrified, but I'm also here, Thea. I'm not going anywhere, not this time." The next 48 hours became a tense vigil, as medications flowed into Thea's veins, fighting to relax her uterus and halt the premature labor. Kieran remained constantly at her side, sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair, fielding urgent business calls in the hallway, returning always to the same position, seated beside her bed, one hand resting lightly on her belly, connected to their daughter. Zora arrived with Thea's hospital bag and took charge of practical matters, contacting clients to reschedule meetings, bringing changes of clothes for Thea, even arranging for Kieran's assistant to courier essential documents to the hospital so he could continue managing the most critical aspects of Blackwood Industries remotely. On the third morning, Dr. Winters delivered cautiously good news. The contractions have stopped for now, and your cervix hasn't dilated further. We'd like to keep you here for observation for at least another week, possibly longer, depending on how things progress. A week? Thea looked around the sterile hospital room with dismay. What about my business? My clients? Your business will survive, Kieran said firmly. Your health and our daughter's well-being come first. Our daughter. The simple phrase sent a complicated wave of emotions through Thea. Despite everything they'd learned about Desmond's manipulation, despite the evidence that Kieran had never wanted to terminate the pregnancy, she still struggled to shift her perception of him from adversary back to partner. I can handle the client meetings, Zora offered from her position by the window. Most of them know me already, and anything I can't answer, I can relay to you for guidance. And I can arrange for better accommodations, Kieran added, eyeing the standard hospital room, with the critical assessment of someone accustomed to luxury. A private suite, better food, whatever would make this more bearable. What would make this more bearable? Thea replied with a hint of her usual spirit, is not being here at all. But since that's not an option, she sighed, resigned to her temporary confinement. A more comfortable chair for you might be nice. You look like you've aged 10 years sleeping in that torture device. Kieran's surprised laugh was genuine, a flash of the connection they'd once shared breaking through the tension. Consider it done. Anything else? My laptop. Project files. If I'm stuck here, I might as well work. Limited work. Dr. Winters corrected firmly. Your blood pressure is still elevated. Stress reduction is essential if we want to keep this baby cooking longer. After the doctor left, Kieran moved to sit on the edge of Thea's bed, careful not to disturb the monitoring equipment attached to her belly. We need to talk about what happens next, he said quietly. Not just the hospital stay, but everything. Thea met his gaze steadily. I suppose we do. I want to be part of our daughter's life, Thea. Not just financially, not just on weekends or holidays, but fully present. Involved in every decision, every milestone. His expression was earnest, determined. And I want to be part of your life too, in whatever capacity you'll allow. Kieran. Please. Let me finish. He took a deep breath, as if gathering courage for what came next. I never stopped loving you. Even when I thought you'd left by choice, even when I couldn't understand why, I never stopped. Finding you again, discovering what really happened. It's like being given a second chance I never thought possible. The raw honesty in his voice caught Thea off guard. This wasn't the polished, controlled Kieran Blackwood, who commanded boardrooms and built business empires. This was the man she'd glimpsed in rare, private moments during their relationship. Vulnerable, sincere, capable of depths of feeling he rarely revealed to the world. I don't expect you to forgive me immediately, he continued, when she remained silent. I don't expect us to pick up where we left off, as if these 6 months never happened. But I'm asking for a chance, Thea. A chance to prove that what we had was real, and that it can be real again. The baby kicked then, a strong movement against Thea's ribs that made her wince slightly. Kieran's hand moved instinctively to the spot, his eyes widening as he felt his daughter's forceful assertion of her presence. She has opinions, Thea said with a small smile, placing her hand over his. Strong ones, apparently. Like her mother, Kieran observed, his thumb gently stroking the taut skin of her belly. The simple touch, the shared moment of connection to their child, broke something open inside Thea, a dam of emotion she'd been holding back since the moment she'd recognized Kieran's car on the rain-soaked highway. I was so angry with you, she whispered, tears filling her eyes. For months, I hated you for what I thought you'd done, for choosing your company over our child, for making me feel like I was nothing more than an inconvenient problem to be solved. Thea. No, please, let me finish now. She blinked back tears, needing to articulate the journey she'd been through. I left Seattle believing you had discarded me, discarded our baby, without a second thought. I rebuilt my life from nothing, determined to prove that we didn't need you, that I could provide everything our daughter needed on my own. Kieran's expression was pained, but he remained silent, giving her the space to continue. And I did it, Thea said, a hint of pride breaking through the emotion. I established my firm, found clients, created a home for us. I prepared to be a single mother because I thought that was the only option. You're remarkable, Kieran said softly. I've always known that, but seeing what you've accomplished these past 6 months, how you've fought for our daughter. He shook his head in wonder. It only makes me love you more. The word love hung in the air between them, both familiar and foreign after all they'd been through. Thea studied his face, searching for any hint of calculation or manipulation. The traits Desmond had claimed were Kieran's true nature. She found only sincerity, hope, and a vulnerability that the public Kieran Blackwood would never allow the world to see. I don't know if I can trust this, she admitted finally. Not because I don't believe you about Desmond's manipulation, I do. But because so much has changed. I've changed. And I need to be sure that what you want isn't just the idea of us, the perfect family you imagined 6 months ago. What I want is you, Thea. You exactly as you are now, independent, fierce, determined. His gaze was steady, unflinching. I don't want to control you or diminish what you've built. I want to be worthy of a place in your life, in our daughter's life. The monitor attached to Thea's belly beeped a warning, her heart rate elevating with the emotional intensity of the conversation. She took a deep breath, conscious of Dr. Winter's warning about stress. We don't have to decide everything right now, Kieran said, noticing the machine's alert. We have time. If the baby cooperates, Thea agreed with a weak smile. She will. He spoke with such certainty that Thea almost believed him. She's a fighter, like her mother. And she's going to need both of us at our best when she arrives, whenever that might be. The conversation was interrupted by a nurse arriving to check Thea's vitals and adjust her medications. By unspoken agreement, they shifted to less emotionally charged topics for the remainder of the day. Practical arrangements for Thea's extended hospital stay, updates on the status of Desmond's termination, Zora's plans for managing the architecture firm in Thea's absence. But that night, as hospital sounds diminished and darkness settled over the room, Thea found herself watching Kieran dozing in his newly acquired, more comfortable recliner. In sleep, the lines of tension left his face, making him look younger, more like the man she had fallen in love with before corporate politics and Desmond's manipulations had torn them apart. I never stopped loving you either, she whispered to his sleeping form, the confession easier in the darkness, without his intense gaze upon her. I just don't know if love is enough. After everything we've been through, whether it was enough remained to be seen. But as Thea drifted into sleep herself, one hand resting protectively on her belly, she allowed herself to imagine a future where the three of them, herself, Kieran, and their daughter, found a way forward together, stronger for having survived the crucible of deceit that had nearly destroyed them. Would you give someone a second chance if you discovered they had been manipulated just as cruelly as you had? Could you rebuild trust after such a profound betrayal, or would the scars be too deep to ever fully heal? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're captivated by this story of deception and redemption, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Lux Love Chronicles with Mr. Wentworth. The uneasy peace of Thea's hospitalization was shattered 4 days later when Riker Harlow arrived, his normally composed expression replaced by barely contained urgency. Kieran was on a conference call in the hallway, managing the ongoing fallout from Desmond's termination, when Riker requested a private conversation. Thea watched through the glass wall of her hospital room as Riker spoke in low, intense tones, Kieran's posture stiffening with each passing moment. Whatever news the security chief had brought, it wasn't good. When Kieran returned to the room, his face was set in grim lines that reminded Thea of their first encounter after 6 months apart, controlled fury barely contained beneath a veneer of professional calm. "What's happened?" she asked, immediately alert to the change in his demeanor. Kieran hesitated, glancing at the monitors tracking her vital signs. "It's nothing you need to worry about right now. Just some corporate maneuvering that requires attention." "Don't do that," Thea said sharply. "Don't shield me like I'm some delicate flower who can't handle difficult information. Whatever Riker told you has clearly upset you, and if it affects you, it potentially affects me and our daughter too." The flash of surprise in Kieran's eyes suggested he wasn't accustomed to being challenged so directly, but instead of bristling, he seemed to appreciate her frankness, his expression softening slightly. "You're right. I apologize." He sat on the edge of the bed, taking her hand in his. "Desmond has gone to the board with allegations that I'm mentally unstable, making irrational decisions based on personal entanglements that threaten the company's future." "What?" Thea couldn't hide her shock. "That's absurd. You're the most rational person I've ever met." A small smile touched Kieran's lips at her automatic defense. Thank you for the vote of confidence. Unfortunately, Desmond has spent years cultivating relationships with certain board members. He's presenting my discovery of your pregnancy and my subsequent actions as evidence of emotional instability. What actions specifically? Firing him without board approval. Restructuring the Hoshimura merger leadership without consultation. Spending the past week at the hospital instead of headquarters during a critical business period. Kieran's jaw tightened. He's calling for an emergency vote to have me temporarily removed as CEO pending a psychological evaluation. Thea felt a chill run through her at the calculated vindictiveness of Desmond's strategy. He can't possibly succeed. You founded the company. You own the majority of shares. 52%, Kieran confirmed, which ordinarily would make this kind of move impossible. But there's a clause in our corporate bylaws, one Desmond himself helped draft years ago, that allows for temporary leadership changes if the CEO is deemed medically unfit to serve, regardless of ownership stake. And being at your child's mother's hospital bedside somehow makes you medically unfit? Thea couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. According to Desmond's narrative, it's not my presence here that's the issue. It's the pattern of erratic behavior since discovering your pregnancy. Kieran's expression darkened. He's painting me as a man having a breakdown, making emotional decisions that jeopardize the company's stability right before the most significant merger in our history. That's ridiculous, Thea insisted. Anyone who knows you would see through this immediately. The board doesn't really know me, Kieran admitted quietly. I've kept them at a professional distance, focused on results rather than relationships. It's a weakness Desmond is exploiting masterfully. Thea felt a surge of protectiveness that surprised her with its intensity. After months of believing Kieran had abandoned her and their child for corporate gain, she now found herself fiercely defensive of him against exactly that accusation. What can you do to fight this? Riker has gathered extensive evidence of Desmond's manipulation, both of company matters and our personal situation. I'll present it at the emergency board meeting tomorrow morning. His hand tightened slightly around hers. But I need to be there in person. I can't appear remotely while making the case for my mental stability. You need to leave, Thea concluded, understanding immediately. Right now. I don't want to leave you here alone, he said, conflict evident in his expression. Not while you're still at risk for preterm labor. I'm not alone. I have excellent medical care, and Zora checks in regularly. Thea squeezed his hand reassuringly. This is important, Kieran. Go fight for your company. Our daughter is more important than any company, he countered, with a conviction that took her breath away. And she's stable right now. Thea reminded him gently. The contractions have stopped. My blood pressure is under control. Dr. Winters said this morning that things are looking promising. Kieran still hesitated, torn between his responsibilities as a CEO and his commitment as a father-to-be. Thea saw in that moment how profoundly her pregnancy had changed him. The once singularly focused businessman, now struggling to balance competing priorities that were equally vital to him. Go, she said firmly. Deal with Desmond once and for all, then come back to us. We'll be waiting. The kiss came without warning, Kieran leaning forward to press his lips against hers in a gentle but fervent gesture that sent warmth spreading through her entire body. It was brief, almost chaste compared to the passion they had once shared, but laden with meaning neither of them was ready to fully articulate. I'll be back as soon as possible, he promised, pulling away reluctantly. If anything changes with your condition, anything at all, call me immediately. I will, she assured him, still slightly dazed from the unexpected kiss. Now go save your empire, Kieran Blackwood. After he left, Thea touched her fingers to her lips, the sensation of his kiss lingering like a promise. 6 months of anger and betrayal had conditioned her to view Kieran as the villain in her story, the powerful man who had discarded her for corporate convenience. Reconciling that perception with the man who had just kissed her with such tender intensity, who was rushing to Seattle to fight for his company, while clearly leaving his heart behind in her hospital room, required a mental adjustment she was still struggling to make. The next 24 hours passed with excruciating slowness. Thea tried to distract herself with work Zora had brought, with mindless television, with the novel she'd been too stressed to read since her hospitalization began. Nothing held her attention for long, her thoughts constantly returning to Kieran facing the board, confronting Desmond, fighting to maintain control of the company he had built from nothing. Zora arrived in the afternoon with lunch that wasn't hospital food, a small mercy, and updates on client projects that required Thea's input. But even her assistant's cheerful presence couldn't fully distract from the tension of waiting for news from Seattle. "Have you heard anything?" Zora asked finally, abandoning the pretense that they were focused on architectural matters rather than the corporate drama unfolding 100 miles away. "Nothing," Thea admitted. "The board meeting started 3 hours ago. It could be a good sign that it's taking so long. Maybe they're actually considering all the evidence rather than rushing to judgment. Or maybe Kieran is in the process of dismantling Desmond piece by painful piece," Zora suggested with a vindictive grin. "I'd pay good money to see that showdown." Thea smiled despite her anxiety. "I'm trying not to think about it too much. Stress isn't good for the baby." Speaking of the baby, Zora's expression grew more serious. "Have you thought about what happens after she's born? With you and Kieran, I mean, I've thought about little else," Thea admitted, "but I don't have any clear answers yet." "Do you trust him now, knowing what really happened with Desmond?" "I trust that he never asked me to terminate the pregnancy," Thea said carefully. "I trust that he's genuinely committed to being a father to our daughter. Beyond that," she sighed, one hand absently stroking her belly, "trust is complicated when you've believed someone capable of complete betrayal for 6 months. 4. But it wasn't him who betrayed you," Zora pointed out. "It was Desmond." "I know that logically, but emotionally?" Thea shook her head. "There's still this voice inside me asking, what if it happens again? What if someone else manipulates the situation? What if his business priorities eventually do conflict with our family, and next time there's no convenient villain to blame? That's the risk with any relationship, though, isn't it?" Zora leaned forward, unexpectedly philosophical. "You never know for sure what challenges will come, what choices the other person will make when tested. Most relationships don't start with this level of complication," Thea countered. "True, but most don't get this kind of clarity either." Zora gestured toward Thea's pregnant belly. "You've seen Kieran at what he believed was his worst moment, discovering your pregnancy, thinking you'd left him without explanation, then finding you again 6 months later. And how did he respond? By dropping everything to be at your side, fighting for his child, confronting the person who hurt you both. Put that way, Kieran's actions did suggest a depth of commitment Thea had been reluctant to fully acknowledge. Not just words or promises, but concrete actions that prioritized her and their daughter above all else, including the company he had spent his life building." Before she could respond, her phone rang, Kieran's name flashing on the screen. Thea answered immediately, heart racing with anticipation and dread. "It's over," he said, without preamble, his voice weary but triumphant. "The board voted unanimously to retain me as CEO and to accept Desmond's termination as presented." Relief flooded through Thea. "That's wonderful news. What happened?" The evidence was overwhelming. Riker's documentation of Desmond's manipulation, both of company matters and our personal situation, left no room for doubt. But what truly sealed his fate was the testimony of Hoshimura's daughter, May. "Hoshimura's daughter?" Thea echoed in surprise. "How was she involved?" She revealed that Desmond had approached her months ago with a proposal that went far beyond business, a marriage arrangement that would cement the merger at the highest levels. As he put it, when she declined, he implied that her family's position would be weakened in the final negotiations. The disgust in Kieran's voice was palpable. She kept silent, until now out of cultural respect for the merger process. But when she heard about his actions toward you and our child, when 5 or 7, she decided to speak up. Thea finished, understanding dawning. So it wasn't just about controlling you or eliminating me as a distraction. He was positioning himself for total control of the merged company, possibly even through marriage into the Hoshimura family. Exactly. His ambition was even more calculated than we realized. Kieran sounded bone-weary, the strain of the confrontation evident in his voice. "The board has authorized a full investigation into all of Desmond's actions during his tenure. There may be other manipulations we haven't yet discovered." "When are you coming back?" Thea asked, surprised by how much she wanted him to return to her side. "That's the other news," Kieran said, his tone shifting to something more hesitant. "The Hoshimura family has requested my presence in Tokyo immediately to renegotiate certain aspects of the merger in light of these developments. It's a critical moment. Their trust has been shaken by Desmond's actions, and personal reassurance from me could be the difference between salvaging the deal or watching it collapse entirely." Thea felt her heart sink despite her best efforts to remain pragmatic. "You're going to Tokyo?" I told them no. The simple statement hung in the air between them, its implications vast and immediate. Kieran Blackwood, notorious workaholic and corporate titan, had refused a critical international business meeting for her sake. You. What? Thea couldn't keep the shock from her voice. I told them I have a more pressing commitment to my family, Kieran explained, a new certainty in his tone. That my place is with you and our daughter until your medical situation is stable. I offered to arrange video conferences, to send my most trusted executives in my place, to accommodate any requirements they might have for remote negotiations. And they accepted that? Actually, yes. There was a hint of surprise in Kieran's voice. Meho Shimura in particular seemed to approve of my priorities. She said it demonstrated the kind of leadership values their family respects, putting family obligations above personal gain. So you're coming back, Thea said, unable to keep the relief from her voice. I'm already on my way. I should be there by tonight, assuming traffic cooperates. The warmth in his tone wrapped around her like an embrace. How are you feeling? Any changes? Everything's stable, she assured him. Dr. Winters says if things continue this way, they might consider releasing me to bed rest at home next week. 1. That's excellent news. I'll see you soon, Thea. He paused, then added softly. I miss you. Both of you. Both. After they hung up, Thea found Zora watching her with a knowing smile. What? She demanded, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. Nothing, Zora replied innocently. Just observing that for someone who's uncertain about trusting Kieran Blackwood again, you look remarkably happy that he's chosen you over Tokyo. It's more complicated than that, Thea protested, though the warmth spreading through her suggested otherwise. Is it? Zora raised an eyebrow. Seems pretty straightforward to me. Powerful CEO discovers he's about to be a father, drops everything to be by your side, fights off corporate coup attempt, then turns down critical international business to return to your hospital room. If that's not a declaration of priorities, I don't know what is. Put that way, Kieran's actions did paint a compelling picture of a man who had fundamentally reevaluated what mattered most to him. Not with words or promises, but with choices that carried significant professional consequences. I'm still figuring it out, Thea admitted. But yes, I'm glad he's coming back. That evening, when Kieran returned to the hospital room looking exhausted but triumphant, Thea felt something shift inside her, a willingness to believe that perhaps their story wasn't over after all, just interrupted by circumstances neither of them could have foreseen. The next 2 weeks established a new rhythm to their lives. Kieran split his time between Thea's hospital room and remote management of Blackwood Industries, conducting video conferences from a makeshift office in the corner of the room, always within sight of her bed. Thea continued to work on a limited basis, reviewing designs and consulting with clients via video calls arranged by Zora. Dr. Winters monitored Thea's condition closely, gradually reducing medications as her body stabilized and the immediate threat of premature delivery receded. By the time Thea reached 28 weeks of pregnancy, a critical milestone for fetal development, the doctor was cautiously optimistic about her eventual release from the hospital. The steroids we gave you have accelerated the baby's lung development significantly, Dr. Winters explained during her morning rounds. If she were to be born now, her chances of survival without major complications would be around 95%. But ideally, we'd like to keep her in there until at least 34 weeks. Another 6 weeks in this room? Thea couldn't keep the dismay from her voice. The hospital walls felt increasingly confining despite Kieran's efforts to make the space more comfortable with personal touches, framed photographs, her favorite blanket from home, flowers that were replaced the moment they began to wilt. Not necessarily in this room, Dr. Winters replied with an understanding smile. If your condition remains stable for another few days, I'd be willing to consider releasing you to strict bed rest at home, with regular monitoring and immediate return if any symptoms reappear. Home, Thea repeated, the word carrying unexpected complexity. Her small house in Bellingham had been home for 6 months, a sanctuary built during her self-imposed exile from Seattle. But with Kieran back in her life, the definition of home had become less certain. We should discuss arrangements, Kieran said after the doctor left, seeming to read her thoughts. Your house isn't ideally set up for extended bed rest. The bedroom is upstairs, the bathroom is small, and there's no easy way for medical equipment to be installed if needed. What are you suggesting? Thea asked, though she suspected she already knew. "I've purchased a property here in Bellingham," he said, confirming her intuition. "A single-level home with accessibility features already built in. It's being modified as we speak to accommodate medical needs and to create a comfortable environment for your recovery." "You bought a house without consulting me?" Thea couldn't decide whether to be impressed by his efficiency or irritated by his presumption. "I bought a house to provide the best possible care for you and our daughter," Kieran clarified carefully. "I'm not assuming you'll live there permanently or that we'll live there together beyond your medical needs. It's simply the most practical solution to an immediate problem." 1. The measured reasonableness of his response diffused Thea's instinctive resistance. He wasn't making assumptions about their future or pressuring her into domestic arrangements before she was ready. He was simply doing what he did best, identifying a problem and implementing the most efficient solution, regardless of cost. "Can I at least see pictures of this house before I agree to recover there?" she asked, softening her tone to indicate she wasn't actually angry. Kieran's relieved smile suggested he'd been prepared for a more contentious response. "Of course." He retrieved his tablet, opening a folder of photographs. "It's on the north side of the city, overlooking the bay. Private but not isolated, with enough land around it to ensure quiet." The images revealed a modern single-story home with expansive windows capturing stunning water views. The architecture was contemporary but warm, with natural materials and thoughtful design that immediately appealed to Thea's professional eye. "It's beautiful," she admitted, swiping through photographs of spacious rooms filled with natural light. "Who designed it?" "A local architect named Jensen Mercer. I believe you know his work." Thea looked up in surprise. "Jensen was my mentor at university. He designed this?" "I did some research on architects whose aesthetic might appeal to you," Kieran explained, a hint of uncertainty creeping into his normally confident demeanor. "I wanted the space to feel welcoming to you, not just functional." The thoughtfulness of the gesture, researching architects whose work she might appreciate, selecting a home based on design principles she valued, touched Thea more deeply than a grand romantic gesture could have. It showed attention to what truly mattered to her, an understanding of her professional passions as well as her personal needs. "Thank you," she said simply. "It looks perfect for recovery." The relief in Kieran's expression was palpable. "I've arranged for a medical suite to be installed in what would normally be the master bedroom. There's a separate room nearby that can serve as a nursery when the time comes." He hesitated. "I'll be staying in the guest suite on the opposite side of the house. Close enough to help if needed, but with appropriate distance." The careful way he navigated their undefined relationship status, present but not presumptuous, supportive but not smothering, continued to chip away at Thea's lingering reservations. This was not the behavior of a man interested in controlling her life or making decisions without her input. This was someone trying, sometimes imperfectly but always sincerely, to balance care with respect for her independence. 3 days later, Dr. Winters officially approved Thea's release to home bed rest, with strict instructions about limited activity, regular monitoring, and immediate return to the hospital at the first sign of contractions or other concerning symptoms. A nurse would visit daily to check vital signs and fetal monitoring, with additional telehealth appointments scheduled throughout the week. The transition to the new house went more smoothly than Thea had anticipated. Kieran had arranged everything with meticulous attention to detail, medical equipment discreetly integrated into the bedroom design, a professional-grade intercom system connecting all rooms, a small refrigerator stocked with her favorite foods within easy reach of the bed. Most touching of all was the architect's drafting table he'd had installed beside the bed, angled so she could work comfortably without leaving her prescribed rest position. A new laptop with specialized design software and a large secondary monitor completed the setup, allowing her to continue limited professional activities without compromising her health. "This is incredible," Thea said as she surveyed the thoughtfully arranged space. "You've thought of everything." "I had help," Kieran admitted. "Zora provided extensive input on your work requirements and personal preferences. And I may have consulted with 3 different maternal health specialists about optimal bed rest environments." The image of Kieran Blackwood, Billionaire CEO, researching optimal bed rest conditions with the same intensity he might apply to a corporate acquisition made Thea smile. His ability to focus completely on a goal, to marshal resources towards solving a problem, was being directed entirely toward her comfort and their daughter's well-being. The days that followed established a new kind of intimacy between them, not the physical passion they had once shared, but something equally powerful in its way. Kieran worked from a home office adjacent to Thea's medical suite, always available when she needed anything but careful not to hover. They shared meals, discussed business challenges, debated current events, and gradually rediscovered the intellectual connection that had first drawn them together. In the evenings, Kieran often read aloud to the baby, everything from classic literature to scientific journals, his deep voice rumbling soothingly through the room as Thea drifted in and out of sleep. Sometimes, in those twilight moments between wakefulness and dreams, she would feel his hand resting lightly on her belly, connecting with their daughter as she shifted and kicked within. By the time Thea reached 32 weeks of pregnancy, a fragile peace had settled over their unconventional household. The immediate danger of premature delivery had passed, though she remained on modified bed rest as a precaution. Kieran had established a routine of splitting his time between Bellingham and Seattle, never away for more than 24 hours, always returning with the focused attentiveness of someone who had missed her even during that brief absence. They still hadn't defined their relationship beyond co-parents, with a complicated history, but the question of what came next lingered unspoken between them with increasing frequency. Thea found herself watching Kieran when he was absorbed in work calls, studying the familiar angles of his face, the intensity of his focus, the rare smile that transformed his features when something pleased him. She was falling in love with him again, or perhaps more accurately, discovering that she had never truly stopped loving him despite 6 months of believing he had betrayed her in the most fundamental way. The realization was both frightening and exhilarating, pushing her toward a decision she had been avoiding since their reunion. The opportunity to address it came unexpectedly, one evening as they sat on the covered patio, watching a spectacular sunset over the bay. Thea had been granted permission for limited vertical time each day, and these sunset viewings had become a cherished ritual, a brief escape from the monotony of bed rest. "The Hoshimura merger finalizes tomorrow," Kieran said, breaking a comfortable silence. "The last documents will be signed in Tokyo at 9 a.m. their time." "That's wonderful news," Thea replied, genuinely happy for his professional success despite the complicated emotions surrounding the merger's origins. "You must be relieved after all the turbulence." "I am." He turned to look at her, his expression contemplative in the fading light. "But it's also caused me to reflect on what happens next. All we am. For Blackwood Industries? For us." His directness caught her off guard. "We've been existing in this strange limbo, Thea, co-parenting without defining what that means beyond our daughter's birth. Living together without acknowledging what we both feel. At least," he hesitated, vulnerability replacing his usual confidence. "What I hope we both feel." Thea's heart raced as the conversation shifted into territory they had carefully avoided for weeks. "And what do you feel, Kieran?" "That I love you. That I never stopped loving you." The simple declaration hung in the air between them. "That these weeks with you, despite the circumstances, have been the happiest of my life. That I want a future with you and our daughter, not just as co-parents, but as partners in every sense." The words Thea had both longed for and feared finally spoken aloud, with no ambiguity or qualification. She searched his face in the golden sunset light, looking for any hint of the calculated businessman making a strategic move. She found only raw honesty, a man laying his heart bare with no guarantee of reciprocation. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not of you, exactly, but of us. Of how completely I fell apart when I thought you had betrayed me. Of how easily someone managed to separate us once before." "I understand that fear," Kieran said, reaching for her hand across the small table between them. "I live with it too, the knowledge that I failed to protect what mattered most. That I was so focused on business concerns I didn't see the threat right beside me. So, how do we move forward with that fear? How do we trust again? By acknowledging that nothing in life is guaranteed, by choosing each other every day despite the risks." His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. "And by building something stronger than before, with better foundations and clearer communication." "That sounds suspiciously like a business strategy," Thea observed with a small smile. "Perhaps," Kieran conceded, returning her smile. "But it's also the truth. I can't promise we'll never face challenges, or that no one will ever try to come between us again. I can only promise that I've learned what truly matters, and that I will fight for us with everything I have." The baby kicked then, a strong movement that made Thea place her free hand on her belly. "She always seems to have opinions about our important conversations." "Smart girl," Kieran said, his expression softening as he watched Thea's hand move in response to their daughter's movements. She knows we're discussing her future too. Find them with their 24. The simple observation crystallized something for Thea, the reality that her choices now affected not just herself, not just her relationship with Kieran, but the family environment their daughter would grow up in. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was still unwritten, waiting for them to be brave enough to claim it. "I love you too," she said finally, the words emerging with surprising ease once she allowed herself to speak them. "I tried not to. I tried to protect myself by keeping emotional distance. But the truth is, watching you these past weeks, how you've prioritized us, how you've respected my independence while still offering support, how you've fundamentally reorganized your life around our needs, it's shown me who you really are." Relief and joy transformed Kieran's features. "And who am I, in your estimation?" "A man worth trusting with my heart again," Thea replied simply. "A man I want to build a future with, however complicated that might be." Kieran moved from his chair to kneel beside hers, one hand cradling her face with infinite tenderness. "I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of that trust," he promised, his voice rough with emotion. Their lips met in a kiss that felt like both homecoming and new beginning, gentle at first, then deepening with the release of months of unacknowledged longing. When they finally parted, breathless and slightly dazed, the sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in dramatic purples and deep blues. "What happens now?" Thea asked, her hand still entwined with his. "Whatever we want," Kieran replied, the certainty in his voice a counterpoint to the open-ended promise of his words. "We design our future together, on our terms, not according to anyone else's expectations or timelines." The architect and Thea appreciated the metaphor, a future they would create together, built on a foundation of hard-won wisdom and mutual respect. Not perfect, perhaps, but stronger for having weathered the storms that had nearly destroyed them. "I'd like that," she said, leaning forward to kiss him again, sealing their new beginning with a gesture that spoke more eloquently than words. 2 weeks later, at precisely 34 weeks of pregnancy, Thea's water broke during a telehealth appointment with Dr. Winters, timing that later struck her as eerily convenient, as if her daughter had waited for medical supervision before making her dramatic entrance. The journey to the hospital was a blur of controlled urgency, Kieran driving with the focused intensity he brought to everything that mattered, one hand gripping Thea's through each increasingly powerful contraction. Unlike her previous premature labor scare, this time there was no stopping the process. Their daughter had decided her time in the womb was complete. 34 weeks is excellent, Dr. Winters reassured them as Thea was settled into the delivery room. Her lungs should be well developed, and all her vital systems are functioning. She'll likely need some time in the NICU, but the prognosis is very positive. The labor progressed with unexpected speed for a first-time mother, as if their daughter was as impatient to meet them as they were to meet her. Kieran remained at Thea's side throughout, his steady presence an anchor during the waves of pain and exhaustion that threatened to overwhelm her. "You're doing amazingly," he murmured against her temple during a brief respite between contractions. "You're the strongest person I've ever known, Thea Morgan." "I don't feel strong right now," she admitted, gripping his hand as another contraction began to build. "Then borrow some of mine," he offered simply. "I have more than enough for both of us." 7 hours after arriving at the hospital, their daughter made her entrance into the world, small but mighty, her angry cry announcing her displeasure at the bright lights and cold air of the delivery room. At 4 pounds, 6 ounces, she was tiny but perfect, with a shock of dark hair and the same determined expression Thea had seen countless times on Kieran's face when confronting a challenge. "She's beautiful," Kieran whispered in awe, as the nurses performed initial assessments before placing the swaddled infant briefly on Thea's chest. "She looks like you." "She has your scowl," Thea countered with exhausted humor, drinking in the precious details of their daughter's face during the moments before she would be taken to the NICU for more specialized care. "And your determination." She wasn't going to wait another day, no matter what the doctors recommended. "A decisive executive," Kieran agreed, one finger gently stroking the baby's cheek, already taking charge of her timeline. Too soon, a neonatal specialist approached to take their daughter to the NICU, explaining the standard procedures for premature infants and assuring them they could visit as soon as Thea was stabilized. As the tiny bundle was lifted from her chest, Thea felt a moment of panic, an instinctive resistance to being separated from her child. "I'll go with her," Kieran said immediately, recognizing Thea's distress. I won't let her out of my sight. We haven't even named her yet. Thea realized suddenly, the whirlwind of delivery having pushed that critical detail from her mind. Kieran paused, looking back at her with unexpected certainty. Lyra, he suggested. It means the harp in astronomy, a constellation that guides navigators home. Lyra, Thea repeated, the name settling perfectly into her heart. Lyra, Morgan Blackwood. The double surname came naturally, a recognition of the joined lives their daughter represented. Kieran's expression softened with emotion as he registered the significance of her choice. Perfect, he said simply, bending to kiss Thea's forehead before following the medical team and their newly named daughter. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of NICU visits, medical consultations, and adjusting to the reality of parenthood ahead of schedule. Lyra proved to be as determined outside the womb as she had been inside it, meeting developmental milestones with a precocious efficiency that amused her doctors and filled her parents with equal measures of pride and exhaustion. She's definitely your daughter, Thea observed one evening as they sat beside the NICU incubator, watching Lyra grip Kieran's finger with surprising strength. That focused expression, the refusal to accept limitations, pure Blackwood. With Morgan creativity and vision, Kieran countered, smiling as the tiny hand maintained its determined hold. She's the best of both of us. The simple observation carried depths of meaning beyond their daughter's genetic inheritance. In their journey from lovers to strangers to co-parents to partners reunited, they had each contributed essential elements to the relationship they were rebuilding. Kieran's steadfast commitment and strategic thinking, Thea's resilience and principled integrity. When Lyra was finally cleared for discharge at 2 weeks old, still tiny but thriving, with no signs of the complications that often affected premature infants, they brought her home to the house Kieran had purchased. The nursery, previously prepared but unused, welcomed its intended occupant with soft lighting and the gentle hum of a state-of-the-art air purification system. Standing in the doorway, watching as Kieran gently settled their daughter into her bassinet, Thea felt a wave of emotion so powerful it nearly overwhelmed her. This moment had seemed impossible 6 months ago, when she'd fled Seattle believing Kieran had rejected both her and their unborn child. That they had found their way here, through deception and pain to truth and healing, seemed nothing short of miraculous. She's finally asleep, Kieran whispered, backing carefully away from the bassinet after confirming Lyra was settled. The monitor's on. We should rest while we can. As they moved quietly from the nursery to their bedroom, now shared without question or hesitation, Thea paused in the hallway, turning to face the man who had become her partner in every sense of the word. I never imagined this, she admitted softly. When I saw you on the highway that day, when you recognized I was pregnant, I thought it was the worst moment of my life. I thought you would try to take her from me, or deny her, or make me regret keeping her. And instead, Kieran prompted gently, his hands coming to rest lightly on her waist. Instead, it was the beginning of everything important, Thea replied, leaning into his embrace. The moment our lives finally started moving in the right direction again. Not without some significant detours, Kieran observed with a rueful smile. But yes, I know exactly what you mean. Seeing you pregnant that day, it was like being given a second chance I never thought possible. 9. Do you think we would have found each other again if not for that chance encounter? The question had lingered in Thea's mind through the months of their reunion and reconciliation. I believe we would, Kieran said with unexpected certainty. I was looking for you, Thea. Had been since the day you disappeared. The private investigators, the search parameters, they would have found you eventually, especially after Lyra was born and her birth certificate was filed. So, fate just accelerated the inevitable? Perhaps. His expression grew more serious, his hands tightening slightly at her waist. Or perhaps we made our own fate through the choices that followed that moment. You chose to listen when I claimed innocence. I chose to investigate rather than assume. We both chose truth over comfortable lies or easy resentment. The perspective resonated with Thea's own beliefs about life, that while circumstances might be beyond our control, our responses to them shaped the path forward. She and Kieran had been victims of manipulation, yes, but they had also been architects of their own reconciliation, building something new from the rubble of what had been destroyed. We still have challenges ahead, she reminded him, practical even in this moment of reflection. Your company is based in Seattle. My firm is here. There's the question of where we'll live long term. How we'll balance 2 careers with parenthood. All solvable problems, Kieran replied with the confidence of a man accustomed to finding solutions where others saw only obstacles. We'll figure it out together, one step at a time. And, as if to punctuate his assurance, Lyra's cry emanated from the nursery, not distressed but demanding, already asserting her place in their newly formed family unit. They exchanged rueful smiles of new parents experiencing the reality of interrupted conversations and sleep deprivation. Together, Fia agreed, taking his hand as they turned back toward the nursery and their impatient daughter, one step at a time. In that moment, surrounded by the home they shared, and moving toward the child they had created, Fia felt a certainty that had eluded her for months. Their story wasn't a fairy tale of perfect love unchallenged by hardship. It was something far more valuable, a hard-won connection forged through crisis, tested by deception, and ultimately strengthened by the conscious choice to build something true together. 6 months earlier, she had believed herself abandoned by the man she loved, left to navigate pregnancy and motherhood alone. Now she walked hand in hand with that same man toward their daughter's room, their future stretching before them not as a predetermined path but as a landscape of possibilities they would explore together. Not perfect, not easy, but undeniably, unmistakably theirs. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Lux Love Chronicles with Mr. Wentworth for more powerful stories of miscommunication, redemption, and hard-won second chances. Share this with someone who needs to remember that the truth has a way of emerging, even from our darkest moments. Sometimes what tears us apart is not what we say to each other, but what remains unsaid. The courage to speak truth, to listen deeply, and to question our assumptions can transform our greatest heartbreaks into our most profound connections.